Lewis's great balls of fire.
Jerry Lee Lewis is undeniably a musical legend. The singer, songwriter, and pianist has frequently been described as rock and roll's first great wild man, as well as one of the most influential pianists of the 20th century. But in a move that destroyed his career, Jerry Lee Lewis got involved with a 13-year-old. Shockingly, he ended up marrying her, and more startling than that is the fact that said girl was also his cousin. Myra Gale Brown perhaps still believed in Santa Claus when she got married to the Grammy Award-winning Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. Not surprisingly, the public didn't react well to this marriage. After the marriage, Lewis's musical career took a nosedive. Keep watching to hear about all this uncomfortably difficult to talk about topic. And no, just because it was the 60s didn't make it okay in the least bit. If Lewis did what he did today, he'd be locked up like R. Kelly. So stick around as Facts First presents Remember When Jerry Lee Lewis Married His 13-Year-Old Cousin. Third time's the charm? By 1957, Jerry Lee Lewis had already gone through 2 failed marriages. In fact, he married his second wife, Jane Mitchum, 23 days before his divorce from his first wife, Dorothy Barton, was finalized. So we're not off to a good start. In case you didn't know, it's a crime to be married to 2 people at the same time. On the 12th of December 1957, Lewis married his third cousin, 13-year-old Myra Gale Brown. A lot has already been written and discussed about Jerry's close blood relationship with Myra. And this was a girl more likely interested in playing with dolls and watching cartoons when she got hitched than to the 23-year-old singer. As much as this marriage makes us squeamish today, and rightfully so, it's worth noting that marrying a third cousin wasn't that uncommon for people back in the mid-20th century. It was also reasonably commonplace for 13-year-olds to get married. Once again, that seems pretty disgusting from a modern perspective, but apparently people were a bit more open to such things back then. As hard as it already is to accept the fact that a grown man married his kid cousin, Lewis complicated matters further by marrying Brown before his divorce from his second wife had gone through. While Lewis didn't experience much pushback from his inner circle, the world responded to the news of his marriage in a different way. Lewis didn't seem to understand this marriage was offensive to most urban markets and people from other nations. Sun Records producer Judd Phillips had advised Lewis against bringing his young bride with him to England for his first European tour. Jerry, always being one to stubbornly stick to his guns, decided to buck that advice and took her anyway. As soon as they stepped off the plane on May 22, 1958, Lewis unapologetically informed the British press that Myra was his wife. Although he must have known some people would find his marriage at least somewhat off-putting because he lied about her age and said she was 15 when they got married. Myra, in turn, told the crowd that 15 wasn't too young to marry because back home you can, quote, marry at 10 if you're able to find a husband. This video is brought to you by Established Titles. Have you ever been interested in being a lord or a lady? With Established Titles, now you can become one. For real. You could officially change your name to Lord or Lady and get it on your credit card, plane tickets, etc. You can even get it on your dating profiles. You can purchase title packs that give you at least 1 square foot of dedicated land on a private estate in Eddleston, Scotland. With the purchase, you'll receive an official certificate with a crest. Your certificate features a unique plot number with which you can see the exact location of your land. Established Titles told me that the first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my plot within a few minutes of walking. Depending on how many of you want to become a lord or a lady, we can build our little Facts First kingdom. They plant a tree with every order and work with global charities, One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future, to support global reforestation efforts. It makes an amazing last-minute gift. Established Titles is actually running an early Black Friday sale, plus if you use the code FV10, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/FV10 to get your gifts now and help support the channel. Robbin The Cradle. The media, both in England and the US, quickly learned the truth about Myra's age and the date of their wedding. As soon as the news broke, the press's response was immediate and damning. The British press took to calling Lewis a cradle robber and a baby snatcher. They then proceeded to heavily criticize his performances, which were known for being hit or miss, depending on what kind of mood the unpredictable rocker was in. They further called for a mass boycott of Lewis's concerts. One paper even went as far as to suggest Jerry's deportation. After numerous tour dates were canned, Jerry and his child bride left the country. When their plane landed in New York, Jerry discovered that the scandal had hopped across the pond to follow them like a curse. This effectively cut his once thriving career short at its peak. For the longest time, it seemed like Lewis could do no wrong. In fact, the only other artist who seemed to be capable of giving him a run for his money was Elvis Presley. But seemingly overnight, the musical empire he had worked so hard to build came crashing down. It didn't help that his latest single at the time was called High School Confidential. This guy had no shame. The American press proved equally harsh as their Brit counterparts, and Jerry Lee Lewis's fee for making personal appearances quickly slid from $10,000 a night to a measly $250. Lewis attempted to apologize by remarrying Myra in a ceremony he thought would validate their relationship. He even went as far as penning an open letter to Billboard magazine expressing his love for her, but no one was having it. The damage was done. Jerry failed to see what the controversy was about. In one interview, he was quoted as saying, "I plumb married the girl, didn't I?" Clearly, he didn't see the problem. In his eyes, he had done the honorable thing, but in reality, there was nothing admirable or honorable about marrying one's 13-year-old cousin. Even more surprising is the fact that when they got hitched, Lewis had moved in with Myra's parents. So you have to question what they were thinking as well. Maybe Lewis was taking notes from his rival Elvis, who, after leaving the army, too fell in love with a teenage girl. When reporters asked Lewis about his marriage, he would frequently tell them that as long as both parties were in love with each other, it was all right with him. While that sentiment is arguably true among consenting adults, you have to draw the line when it comes to marrying people that have barely hit puberty. The fact that Lewis couldn't wrap his mind around that is dumbfounding. Gone Country. Jerry Lee Lewis eventually was able to stage a comeback of sorts in the late 60s as a country singer. Perhaps among country fans, his actions weren't viewed with as much outrage, or maybe by then some of the controversy surrounding his marriage had died down. Either way, he was not able to reach the same heights he had once enjoyed. Lewis outlived Elvis, but his career as a rock and roll star was forever tarnished by the scandal of marrying Myra. The two got divorced in 1970. In 2004, divorce proceedings began between Lewis and his sixth wife, Carrie McCarver, with whom he tied the knot in 1984. He married his seventh wife, Judith Brown, on March 9, 2012. In case you're curious, Myra is still alive and well to this day. She and Lewis had two children together, a son named Steve Allen Lewis, who tragically drowned to death when he was just 3 years old, and a daughter named Phoebe, who managed her father's career and lived at his ranch home in Nesbit, Mississippi. The day after Lewis married Judith, however, who, mind you, was the ex-wife of the brother of Myra Gale Brown, Lewis severed his business ties with Phoebe and revoked her power of attorney. In 2017, he sued his daughter and her husband, claiming they owed him a substantial sum of money. He also claimed that Phoebe had defamed him on Facebook. In 2019, U.S. District Attorney Neil Biggers made a ruling that the majority of claims Lewis made were barred by a statute of limitations. Jerry Lee Lewis is now 87. While he rarely makes public appearances, in 2020 he celebrated his 85th birthday with a live stream on YouTube, Facebook, and his website. The quintessentially COVID-era remote performance features appearances and performances by legends like Elton John, Mike Love, Willie Nelson, and Priscilla Presley. A little under a year before that event, Lewis suffered a minor stroke in Memphis in 2019. He fully recovered, but was forced to cancel his upcoming performances. In 2022, Ethan Coen directed a documentary called Jerry Lee Lewis, Trouble Mind Mind. The film tackles Lewis's prolific musical career while also honing into some of his more controversial moments, including his marriage to Myra. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know Jerry Lee Lewis married his 13-year-old cousin and his music career quickly faltered afterwards? Let us know in the comments.